Good morning and welcome to Barbara's Bulletin. I'm your host, Barbara. We're glad you're joining us today for another edition of our daily news podcast. As we begin, let's take a look at some of the top stories making headlines. First up, we have a fascinating discussion about the value of money, specifically the US dollar. There are those who believe that the Federal Reserve can control the supply of dollars and thus influence its value. However, others argue that this is not the case, and that the value of the dollar is determined by production and market forces. According to an article by John Tamny, a contributor to Forbes, the idea that the Fed can control the supply of dollars is a misconception. He argues that money is a measure, like the foot or the second, and that its value is not determined by how much of it is printed, but rather by what it represents. Tamny points out that for much of U.S. history, the dollar had a fixed definition in terms of gold, with $1 being equivalent to 1/26 of a gold ounce. He also notes that when President Franklin D. Roosevelt devalued the dollar in 1933, he didn't print more dollars, but rather redefined what a dollar was worth. This raises interesting questions about the role of the Federal Reserve and the government in determining the value of the dollar. Can they really control its value by adjusting the money supply, or is it more complex than that? We'll be exploring this topic further on today's show, with expert analysis and insights from both sides of the debate. We'll also be looking at other top news stories, including updates on the economy, politics, and more. So stay tuned, it's going to be a fascinating conversation. We'll be right back with more of today's top news on Barbara's Bulletin. Welcome back to Barbara's Bulletin. We're continuing our coverage of global news, and today we have two significant stories to share with you. First, let's turn our attention to the Asia-Pacific region, where tensions are rising between Thailand and Cambodia. According to reports from the Japan Times, Thai and Cambodian troops have clashed in the border area of northeastern Thailand, marking the first breach of a ceasefire agreement that was backed by the United States in late July. The conflict began when Cambodian soldiers allegedly fired into the Chong An Ma area in Ubon Ratchathani province, prompting a response from the Thai military. The situation is being closely monitored, with both sides accusing each other of initiating the violence. The Thai army has placed its Suranari task force on alert and ordered it to respond appropriately, while Cambodia's Ministry of National Defense has stated that its armed forces are fully prepared to defend the nation's territorial integrity. This escalation in tensions is a concerning development, especially given the efforts made to establish a ceasefire just a few weeks ago. The international community will be watching this situation closely, hoping for a swift resolution and a return to peace. In another part of the world, the situation in Gaza continues to deteriorate. Israeli tanks have moved deeper into residential districts of Gaza City, according to reports from medics and witnesses. Local health authorities are expressing deep concern about their inability to respond to numerous calls for help, fearing for the safety of residents trapped in targeted areas. The Israeli military launched its ground offensive on Gaza City earlier this month, following weeks of intensified strikes. The operation has forced hundreds of Palestinians to flee, although many remain sheltered in the heart and western areas of the city. The humanitarian situation is becoming increasingly dire, with reports of significant damage to infrastructure and a growing number of casualties. As we follow these developments, it's essential to consider the human cost of conflict and the need for diplomatic efforts to resolve these crises peacefully. Both stories serve as reminders of the complex geopolitical landscape we inhabit and the importance of fostering dialogue and understanding between nations. Stay tuned for our final story of the day, right here on Barbara's Bulletin. Welcome back to Barbara's Bulletin. As we wrap up today's show, I want to bring you up to speed on the latest developments in Washington, D.C. regarding the looming government shutdown. With just days left before the deadline, lawmakers are scrambling to reach a spending agreement that will keep the government running. According to recent reports, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries expressed optimism that a shutdown can be avoided, citing the need for bipartisan common ground and a spending agreement that meets the needs of the American people. However, Democrats and Republicans remain at odds over key issues, including the expiration of Affordable Care Act tax credits. In an interview on ABC's This Week, Jeffries emphasized the importance of extending these tax credits, which are set to expire at the end of the year. He argued that allowing them to lapse would send shockwaves through the system and harm everyday Americans who are already struggling to make ends meet. On the other hand, House Majority Leader Steve Scalise is advocating for a short-term funding bill that would allow negotiations to continue into November. Scalise noted that this approach would maintain current funding levels, which were previously approved by the Senate, including Democrats. Meanwhile, New Jersey Senator Andy Kim shared his insights on how Democrats are navigating these negotiations. In an interview with NPR, Kim discussed the party's strategy for avoiding a shutdown and finding common ground with their Republican counterparts. As the clock ticks down, President Trump has announced plans to meet with congressional leaders on Monday in an effort to broker a deal. With so much at stake, it's essential for lawmakers to put aside their differences and work towards a solution that benefits all Americans. That's all for today's Barbara's Bulletin. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, stay engaged.